Welcome back to the channel, everyone. So today's project is we're going to put a little awning over top of this patio that we poured for one of the tenant houses. And to do this, we're going to cut into the fascia, remove all of the soffit, and then figure out exactly how we're going to put an awning over it. And what we're working with here is some rough cut lumber that was sawn from a portable sawmill and a whole bunch of trees that were dropped down. Obviously this is a very rural setting. We're back in the country, quite a long ways from any town here, and making do with the resources that we have available. Got a nice little workbench surface there that seems to be working out quite well. And all of these were rough cut 2x4s, so I'm planing them down to make them nice and smooth. A little later on you'll see we'll be throwing a routed edge on them. But for right now, we're just getting them prepped to make sure they're nice and square and smooth to the touch if anyone wants to reach up and touch them. And this is all the prep work here. This will take a while. We'll get through this and then we can start the actual build process. For projects like this, I quite often find myself standing around and staring at it and figuring out exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. Cut a lot of that out of here, but I'm trying to right now determine the exact slope that I'm going to use and how high it needs to be, where my center beam needs to go for support, and get that prepped and ready, get the holes drilled into the concrete for it. And that typically takes quite a lot of time figuring out exactly how it's going to get set up. I need to have a different slope on this than I do my actual roof. Primarily because if I continue the same slope, by the time you get out to the edge of the patio, you're going to be hitting your head when you try to walk onto the patio. And we can't have that. So the slope's going to have to change as it comes down the roof, which is fine because the roof still has a pretty good slope there. So even with a change in slope, it's not going to affect all that much. In this spot here, I'm actually notching out the end of the 2x4 where it goes into the roof line, just so it can get a better angle at it, and it'll sit on top of the existing wall. So part of it's attaching to the rafter, part of it's sitting on top of the existing wall, and the rest of it's going to be on this center beam that I'm installing here on the next day. So we're here the next day. It's a little early in the morning, a little less sun, a little more shade, much nicer to work in, even though it's still quite hot out since we are in mid-June. And got a little more help today, so things are going to move a little quicker. And it doesn't hurt that I have the speed turned up, so it's moving quicker. Yeah, anyways. Got the main post set here, and I'm adding the ridge beam that I'm using to support all of the rafters. And this guy is going to do all the support, and it's going to hang off the end from there. And I'm just checking my height, checking the spacing. I want to get it set such that it's a little over 6 feet as you're walking in, and I'm adding a little bit of decoration here to the end of the post, kind of give it a little bit of class as you look at it from the end. We're cutting these off, and then we're doing some sanding on it to smooth it out a little bit, and then we're going to do a rounded edge around the outside to give it a real nice polished look. And all the bottoms of the trusses that we're adding are all going to have this round over. It's just a 1/2 inch round over along with the sculpted edge on the end, and at the end of the video you'll see what that looks like. I think it turned out pretty well. Very, very cheap to put this together. The only real expense that they had was the metal roofing, which was all new, but all the, as I mentioned before, all the 2x4s were all rough cut from a sawmill, and it was pretty cheap to have that done. So the roof is really starting to come together here. Once we get these on, we can add the stringers to the top, and then we can put the metal roof pieces down. We've got to make sure that these are all the same length sticking out of the wall, same distance apart for uniformity. We've got a few on the ends that we kind of have to fudge around a little bit to get them in just the right spot. But I think when it's all said and done, it'll look just fine. Here I'm adding 4x4 angle supports to each of the beams. We're tacking them on just now with some really long screws, but we're going to go back a little later and add some large anchor bolts. The drill bit we had there was too dull and we weren't able to finish those holes to get the anchor bolts in. Believe it or not, this was actually the trickiest part of the build, is getting these stringers set. This last one that we're adding has to be in just the right position where the new metal can slide under the old metal and not be too pinched. It needs to slide under it and then up in behind it quite a ways to make sure we won't have any water running back. Make sure the angle's still there for the water runoff to occur. So we kind of got to wedge it in there, and I want to actually slide it on top of the plywood that is underneath that current sheet metal on the roof. So it's a very delicate spot there. Got to get it lined up just right. And I think we did okay. We had to reposition a little bit, get it put in the right spot, and then it ended up working out quite well. We definitely had a really good team working on it together that day, and that's 3 generations you're seeing there: my dad, myself, and my son and stepson. And between the 4 of us, it went pretty quick. and we were done by 1 o'clock. Here is the mostly finished project. We've got the roof on, everything is sealed up. We still got to put those anchor bolts in, and we still need to finish up some of the fascia there, the metal fascia on the soffit, but that's together. But I think it turned out quite well. Got some nice decorative trim there. It's nice solid. It's all hemlock except for the pine pressure treated 4x4s. Carried the weight of myself without any problem, and I'm certainly not a small guy. But it worked out really well. The only change I can possibly see in the future is maybe towards the fall, cutting a little bit of that metal roof off the end there with a metal circular saw blade, just because that's quite a bit of an overhang over that last stringer, and we get a lot of snowfall here in northern Pennsylvania.